r/ask Reddit. Reddit, when did you cheat something and get away with it? In university, we had an exam that was online, and during the exam, we weren't allowed to have any other tabs open. I had a study sheet that I created on Word beforehand, and I copied the whole document and pasted it into one of the short answer boxes. My professor walked around the lab to make sure no one was cheating. So every time he walked by, I scrolled up to the top where the multiple choice questions were, and when he left, I would search for the answers in the little short answer text box. That's so clever. I've never thought about it before. Would you try it again if the opportunity came? Maybe, but it's extremely risky. I wasn't prepared for that exam at all, and if I were to get caught, I would have definitely been kicked out of school. I was terrified that my computer would freeze or something and that he'd see how. I hired some truly random guy at a pub to write to my final exam paper for a media studies class because I had too many advanced courses to study for. Not only did he not duck it up, but he earned such flawless marks, unlike me, that the professor made a special note of its quality. Brilliant work. This was unlike anything you've ever written before. Ouch, and thank God. Unlike anything you've ever written before. Are you saying I didn't write this and that I hired someone I met at a pub and paid him money to do IT because I totally didn't do that? I mean, you joke, but that sounds exactly like what the professor was saying. Or maybe a little closer to, I know you didn't write all of this, but I'm not going to call it out unless I see you do it again. I have submitted corrupted Word documents and gotten A's for them. I once did the reverse of this. I couldn't afford Word, so my actually written paper was saved as .rtf. When my professor emailed me that she couldn't open in .rtf, I was like .wtf, but I printed and drove a hard copy over from across town within the hour. I was the top of my class in chemistry, but something was wrong with my brain on our fourth exam. Couldn't think to save my life. I was so frustrated that I crumpled my test and threw it in the trash at the end of the hour. Next class, the teacher asked me to stay behind, apologized for losing my exam, and averaged my previous exam scores. I feel bad, but she saved my ass. I also blanked out in one of the tests. Here's what I did. So, my classroom is literally just an entire building with probably 300 plus students in a class. There I was with my unfinished test and everyone was getting up since there's only a few minutes left, class is over. During it, I quickly stashed my test in my bag and walked away. I emailed my professor saying that I wasn't feeling well, so I couldn't go to class. Since my class is so big, the professor wouldn't be able to remember everyone. After sending the email, I went to the nurse's office and told her I was very sick last night and I wondered if I can get a checkup. She checked everything and obviously I was in perfect health. At the end of it all, I asked her for a doctor's note. Most of the time, the nurse just writes a generic note with dates on it, which was the night before and the day of the exam. More believable if I was sick for more than a day, instead of just the day of the exam. I got an email from the professor, and he needs a doctor's note, which I got. Either he doesn't care or fell for it. He told me I can retake the exam in a week. I studied the stashed exam, and wouldn't you know it, he didn't change anything. Of course, I purposely missed a few questions here and there just in case. In high school government class we had a final exam I really wasn't prepared for. The day off, I wore ripped jeans and wrote notes on my thighs in spots I could see by just pulling on a hole a little bit. In high school, I had a pair of jeans that I doodled on with ballpoint pen and markers. By the end of the year, I had a whole mural going down both legs. It was also easy enough to incorporate certain test answers into the mural. I've told this story before. I started college in the early 2000s, had to drop out, and went back near the end of that decade. A lot changed in those intervening years, including sites like Turnitin not existing my first go around. I had an essay I got an A on my first start at college, and I still had it on a floppy disk. When I returned years later I had another course that had an essay due. I wasn't feeling doing it, but I remembered this old essay I had from before, and I knew that Turnitin didn't exist then. I only turned in a paper copy that time, so there was no online presence of it, nor would it get flagged as unoriginal. So I got my disk converter out, got that old essay out, changed the date course number, and turned it in on Turnitin for this other course. And as I knew would happen, it wasn't flagged. I also got an A on that paper too. Yep, you can't do things like that now. Before Turnitin I reused the same paper with slight modifications 4 times between high school and college. Twice in high school and twice in college. It was on gun control if you're wondering. The last class I used it on was in college ethics to add a bit of irony. It was a hell of an essay. 4 AS as well. I rode it like a damn racehorse. Parking garage hack with a cookie sheet on the sensor. Park and take your cookie sheet. When you're walking back, slap that mofo on the sensor and get a new ticket. Then leave. Saves hundreds in Chicago. It thinks the sheet is a wheel and spits a new ticket. Wait, where is the sensor? I always thought the sensor is embedded into the floor and triggered by vehicle's weight. Look for the cutout square. It's metal sensing, not weight. Full aluminum doesn't work. In high school chemistry we had to memorize some polyatomic ions, which was just tedious because each had a different charge that I keep getting mixed up. On the final exam we could use the periodic table he gave us from the start of the year as long as there are no notes on it, which he quickly checked. The page was a grainy photocopy and every student had specks of dirt or eraser bits on their sheets. On the main atoms for each of the ions I penciled in tiny dots to tell me the charge for that ion. I got away with it and it probably got me 2 questions on a 50 question test. Now they give us a sheet with all the polyatomic ions. I got a sheet but couldn't use it on the test. I'm sure it changes based on which school you go to. So there was this place called Discovery Zone when I was a kid. Usually had birthday parties there as it was a mix of a jungle gym with slides and tunnels along with an arcade. Think Chuck E. Cheese with a big playground. Like most places that had arcades for kids, you earned tickets and could cash them in for prizes. But like all these places, the good prizes cost a shitload of tickets. My parents, being sensible, wouldn't give me unlimited money to play the game, so I was only able to get a few hundred tickets from some of the easier ones. Not enough for anything good. I couldn't decide what I wanted or if I was going to be able to play more before spending the tickets, but I didn't want to carry them around with me. They had a system that one of the staff counts your tickets, writes the number on the back of a ticket and signs it so you only have 1 ticket to carry. I really wanted one of the big stuffed animals because they had all the good Looney Tunes characters. My brain went to work. I figured out that I could write whatever number of tickets I wanted on the back of another ticket, fake the signature and cash it in. Problem was my writing wasn't good enough to copy someone else's, so I brought one of my friends in on it. I explained the plan to him and he gets to work writing the ticket. To my dismay, the number of tickets he puts down is in the tens of thousands. I thought for sure it was way too much to be believable, but his argument was that it has to be a large amount for us to both get something good, and we won't be able to use the trick too many times. I agreed and figured we didn't have much to lose. We waited until the staff member whose signature we forged went on break and got to the counter while they were away. The staff member looked at our ticket, gave us a good up and down, shrugged and asked us what we wanted. We made away with the giant Tasmanian devil, Marvin the Martian, and Sylvester the cat, as well as a bunch of smaller items to use up the excess tickets. Our cover story for how we earned so many tickets without any money from our parents is that we found a bunch of the game tokens in the ball pit and used them to earn the tickets. To add icing to the cake, in the back corner of this place there was a net high up with more of the Sylvester the cats on it. We used our Sylvester the cat to knock another one off. He took the Marvin the Martian and one of the Sylvesters. I took the other and the Tasmanian devil. Our parents never really pressed us on it, but one of our classmates was always incredibly suspicious of our story. Over 2 decades later and I still have those stuffies. My last paper that I had to turn in for my bachelor's was a group paper. We were writing the paper on a Google Doc, and I was the last one to submit my portion. As I was reading the paper, preparing to begin typing, I realized that one of my group mates had written what was supposed to be my part, and had written it better than I did, so I just left it. I didn't tell the group what happened, and just submitted the paper. We got an A. The degree's on my wall. I have a feeling they know. Unless you weren't that behind on submitting it, My wife has done others parts in group projects when they wait till the last day. She never wants to risk failing because of them and just does it herself. She has had one or two folks take advantage of that though, and surprisingly, yeah, it was never my intention. I had done my research and knew what I was going to write, but whoever did my part had written it better than what I would have come with. It was really awkward for me, and I felt terrible. Wasn't a fun situation. My senior religion class had quizzes every week. I wrote down answers in a eraser on the desk. It could only be seen from a certain angle, and could be wiped away quickly. I cheated almost every quiz and never got caught. I found one time right before a test I saw the entire notes page drawn in pencil eraser. I wouldn't have said anything except for I knew that if I didn't say something I would get in trouble. We ended up taking 20 minutes to evenly erase the whole table so nothing would be visible. High school gym class. Had to run the timed mile. I am not fit nor athletic. We had 2 days of exercise challenges for a grade. Day 1 being push-ups, sit-ups, etc. Second day was the mile. I was absent the first day when my teacher had paired the class up into partners that would help each other keep track of stats, etc. Being an odd number of students. When I returned the next day, the only person left to be my partner was my old, rude gym teacher. We head out to the track to run the mile. Teacher says one partner from each group go first. When you are done we will have the second group go. The first group went and I just stood behind the teacher. The second group went and I did the same. Then I waited until she looked to her right and I came up from her left. Breathing heavy, acting exhausted, I gave her my time. Perfectly happy with my shitty time and not even running a step. In high school, around 30 years ago, I and the rest of the student council were counting up the votes for the new members, including the votes for the new president. I didn't like one of the candidates for president, a dumb jock, and the other candidate was one of my friends. The guy I didn't like was clearly winning, so I counted their votes as votes for my friend as the principal and vice principal observed. I didn't want it to be obvious, so I only changed a few votes at a time. My friend won by a small margin, so I didn't feel too badly. Later on I found out that everyone who was counting the votes were doing the exact same thing. I opted to take an online driving course rather than get points on my license for a speeding ticket. I took the final exam using a bootable Red Hat Linux Live CD and used whatever default browser came with that OS. The online test was such that the controls weren't nearly as locked down as with a Windows-based browser, so I was able to copy and paste text from the course to a text editor and then search it while taking the exam. I failed my maths GCSE back in school, so I had to retake it in college, and I was set in a class who were pretty good at it. However, I had no effing clue what was going on. It was until COVID hit hard in our area and we had to go to lockdown. Our classes were held on a website where your work was monitored by the teacher. It wasn't like Zoom or Microsoft Teams as we had no meetings. It was just here's the work, do it and hand it back in digitally. They don't know whether we use calculators or not, and I took that matter into my own hands. Every single question I got right due to the trusty calculator. The teacher didn't notice as I did get the majority of my questions right at the campus. In the end, I passed with the highest grade, but I never told anyone as I was ashamed of what I did. But now it's in the past. I can laugh at it and just say hey, I passed it with flying colors. When I was at school my teachers liked to remind us you won't be carrying a calculator around in your pocket every day. If only they'd known that's exactly what we do. Senior year of high school, English class. Had a 3-page essay due that neither me nor my two friends had even started. Teacher starts collecting them. I walk up to her and say that I did it but forgot it at home on my printer and if there was any possible way I could bring it to her tomorrow morning. Teacher says sure, that's fine. Go home that night and slam out the entire thing and hand it in the next day with no late penalty. I've done this a few times. When I was in middle school, we were forced to do a project in the science fair in our honors English class. The project was like 300 points. So if you didn't do it then it would bring your grade down to a D or F. We had like 3 months to do it, but I did nothing until the last minute. The night before, I busted my ass and got the whole project done in one night. Next day, I turn it in and get an A. I even went clear to the regional science fair. and ended up getting 3rd in my category, all with a project I did in one night. This one isn't necessarily cheating, but nobody really knows that you're allowed to use the TI-84 stats calculator for the math portion of the SAT. I was about to take the SAT for the 2nd time and didn't study at all, but I brought in my brother's old TI-84. I remember going in there with that absolute brick and thinking there's no way they'll let me use this, but they did. This calculator literally gives you the answers for a bunch of questions if you know how to use its functions, and it brought my math score up by at least 80 points. The more you know. Every time I had to write a book report in high school, I wrote it on the same book that I never fully read. Used that book at least 4 times. In college I worked for campus police as unarmed security, and while I was assigned to the library, I realized that the traffic officers couldn't possibly enforce 30-minute short-term parking spots littered across campus, as they simply didn't have the manpower to check them multiple times a day. Anyone could park in these spots, so for the last year of college I unregistered my car with the school and didn't buy a parking pass, but got the best parking on campus. Back in the 90s, when some of the earlier win a free 20 Oz drink gimmicks were starting up, I was able to see enough of the letters on the lids by tilting the bottle and squinting to determine which bottles were the winners. I was like 8-9 at the time and was on a road trip with my family. Every gas station I got another free drink. This continued for years. In high school I turned in one of my girlfriend's research papers. She was older and had already taken the class. I changed maybe 10 words and put my name on it. Somehow got a better grade than she did. Kinda cheated. Death at birth. Born at 26 weeks. Basically no complications. For me. Twin died after 2 months. My body works. There are some small disabilities in my brain, but I can live a normal life. So yeah, I feel like I cheated life death. Has to take some stupid courses online for work. It was like a 40-hour long course. I found out that you could insert complete for the modules and a score in the test sections of the HTML and refresh it, and it would show up as completed and the score you entered. Got the course done quickly and was never called on it. Had another course as well that would let you see the test answers in the HTML code. The only real tell would be if someone looked at how long you took to actually complete each module, but no one ever did. I did notice at some point they came up with an updated version of the courses that would no longer allow this to be done. Never got called on it, so it was a win. In 6th grade, we had these desks that had an open slot by where you sat, so you could put your binders and stuff inside. For Spanish tests, I'd put my textbook in there and discreetly flip the pages whenever there was something I didn't know. Somehow I never got caught. I had to do online math classes for 3 years and learned how to speedrun the classes. Of course I would put them off, and 1 lesson a day became 3 and then 5. Sometimes even 10. The courses were very forgiving. To do one of the 70+ lessons you had to read how to do the math problems, then totally not bullshit the practice quiz, and then take the graded quiz, which was 10 multiple choice questions. Periodically a lesson will only be more reading, and some were 50 multiple choice questions. The trick was the normal lessons could be resubmitted to get a better score. If random guesses didn't work, then I could do that as many more times as I wanted to until I got something above passing. In the cases where bullshitting did nothing, all I did was look up calculators or use an online graphing calculator to solve problems. That was the safest bet, especially for the 50 question tests, which were one time only. While normal people spent their days doing homework or risking it with tests that require you to do multiple questions of different types, I stayed home and skipped over everything. God, I feel like a weakling. I had missed the original date for my math final before Christmas, so the day I got to take it was when everyone was watching a movie right before break, so the lights were out and the teacher sat me at his desk so I wouldn't get distracted. He then went and sat at desk with a student so he could watch the movie too. I was moving around on the desk looking at things, and I noticed he had left the answer key to the final underneath some papers. I would just move it slightly down to see the answers and then put it on my test. I was lucky the test was all multiple choices and you couldn't have work on your final paper, so when you were done you just threw away your scrap paper with your work on it. Easiest day of my life. Sorry Mr. Lieber, I know you thought I was some genius. On my final math exam in high school, I had a bunch of math formulas written on a piece of paper and hid it behind the toilet in the boys' bathroom. So I'd asked to go to the bathroom to have a look at any of the math formulas. So during my 10th grade year, we had to take driver's ed. We had these terrible simulators, and I loved them so. During one of the levels, it let you speed, just to see what would happen. There was a scripted event in which a deer would jump out, but that only really happened if you went forwards. I did not go forwards. It turns out, if you went backwards all the invisible walls were gone, and there were no consequences at all. Eventually the teacher caught on, though. I was driving up a mountain and, as you do, I swerved off the road and flew over the trees. It was liberating. This was at the same time that the principal of the school was going and looking around classrooms. So the principal and driver's ed instructor got to watch me soar through the open air. I got in huge trouble and was barely allowed to get back on. I taught some other kids to do the same thing and, eventually, the entire grade was doing it. I got cornered by the driver's ed instructor who more or less threatened to sue me for breaking the computers. Look, pal, exploitation does not equal setting it on fire. I did not get in major trouble, though. As I pointed out, I cannot be held responsible for other people's actions. Oh, and one time I ran someone over in that game and their ragdoll kept getting bigger until it blotted out the sun. There are so many stories tied to that simulator. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.